For a year and a day, Cain labored in service to the Crone, who with blood wisdom bound him as surely as any prisoner. She would visit him at night, force him to give up his blood for her secret elixirs and potent formulas. She would take his childer's childer, and they would never be heard from again. But Cain was wise. He did not drink from her ever again, and she did not ask him to, thinking that he was ever in her thrall. One night, Cain went to the crone in the forest, and told her of terrible dreams that he had during his sleep. "I fear for my life, crone. I fear the prophecy of Ariel, and my children's lust for my blood. Tell me secret knowledge, that I might be powerful against mine own." And the crone went to a tree made of gopher wood. She broke off a limb. She took a sharp knife and sharpened the limb. "Take this piece of living wood, sharp and strong. Pierce the heart of your wayward child. It will render him still, and yours to command. Instead of feasting on your heart's blood, he will feel the weight of your justice." Cain said, "Thank you, mother." And with that, moving in quick movements, Cain took the stake of gopher wood, seized it, and drove it deep within the crone's heart. Because Cain, wise Cain, had fed not upon her for a year and a day, and because he forced his will through his hands, he broke the bond she held on him and turned his fortune. She laughed again as blood welled up and poured out of her mouth. Her eyes poured out hate. Greetings, Cainites. I am Maquette, and welcome back to our world of darkness for Midnight Mass. The moon has grown dark again, and it is time for us to celebrate our bond under Cain and yet another Vuldery, to keep our wills strong, to keep us immune from the blood bond of the crone, and anyone who may follow in her footsteps. So, I ask you to please join me once more in this rite of Thanksgiving. In the name of Cain, this chalice of vitae, which shall contain all vitae of this pack, in honor of Cain, his practices, we, his children, do take libation in his name. Please, pass this around and then bring it back up to me. Tonight, our sermon will be on the path of power and the inner voice. Now, many of you may have heard of this from other ramblings in the past and think that this is just the path of those who are Ventru-blooded, those Ventru anti-true, but that's not so. The path of power and the inner voice has a very particular meaning to many of us. It is not just about domination for the sake of domination. It is about domination for those of which who have proven themselves worthy to do so. We need to respect those who follow this path, because without the mindset that those individuals who follow path of power in the inner voice have, Cain himself would still have been under the thrall of the crone. Yes. Within this chalice sits the vitae of all. I consume you in trust as you consume me in trust. Our blood shall never belong to those who would dominate us. In Cain's name. Pass this around. Now, in the past, this has been a path dominated primarily by those practitioners that did belong to Ventru blood, back when we accepted the anti-tribu paths. The Ventru, the Lasombra, they all practiced this, but anyone could if they had the right mindset. This is a rite of ambition. This is a rite of power. And this is how, when you know that it is you calling the shots and not anybody else who could possibly be doing it to you. This power is the willpower, brought carnate. This is the ability to make sure that no one else is controlling and calling the shots of yourself. Members of Path of Power and the Inner Voice tend to be sure-footed in their actions. And I've seen many Cainites believe that Path of Power and the Inner Voice are those for your stockbroker type vampires. But in reality, this is pure and utter self-worship, close to the pure Satanism that you can find of those who follow Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. This is self-worship. This is where you put yourself as an embodiment of Cain. This is where you prove your worth. Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and I am excited to be here for another Midnight Mass. And tonight we are going to be going over the Path of Power in the Inner Voice in the Sabbat, the Black Hand book. This is wonderfully brought about in this new setting, and the way that it's put here is, again, just like any other Path of Enlightenment. This is how the outer groups see it. We will go through the other Sabbat book, as we always do, going over how they portray themselves. But I do want to point out, as I will when I pull the book out, that is not a canon book. It is written by people who also did work on the one that we're working on here. But as always, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition is focused on the idea of humanity more than anything else, so they have not released an actual canon portrayal of that of those practices as of yet. But until we have that, let's go ahead and hop into this. What we have: Path of Power and the Inner Voice. Practitioners are known as the Unifiers, or as the Allans. And they are the ones who try to pull everyone together under themselves. They are the ones who are going to create what's known as a cult of personality in the Sabbat, which is funny because the Sabbat is actually already a cult of personality. It is a cult of personality of Cain, where when these are trying to find disciples for themselves. The book states the premise of the Path of Power and the Inner Voice. Unsurprisingly, the acquisition of might, by which they can impose their personal will upon the world around them. They seek to accumulate power and subjugate their lessers in a journey to become the apex predator. Indeed, even the beast itself is held in subjugation by the most accomplished unifier, like a snarling hound at the end of its master's chain. That isn't by accident. For the unifiers, the beast is a tool, and knowing when to lose it or when to let it pull them is part of mastering it. More than in other paths, unifiers court frenzy, trusting their ability to dominate the beast, riding the wave at the edge of self-control and leaving someone else to clean up afterwards. After all, what is the inchoate rage of a frenzy if not one more weapon at the disposal of the damned? So, I love the direction that Path of Power and the Inner Voice has taken in V5, because back in the day when I first started playing, and this could just be what people did in games that I played in, it did tend to be the Venturanti Tribute, or possibly the Sombra, and they were always so well controlled. Path of Power and the Inner Voice really did seem like something that elder members of the Camarilla could portray. But in this, it's more of a self-worship of the beast and of themselves. And it would not work in the Camarilla. And I love that. I love the fact that it is actually separated. This was the option for vampires in the Camarilla who were losing themselves to the beast and didn't have a way to continue on. But I really don't think that any path of enlightenment should work within the Camarilla. Honorable Accord? No. Path of Power and the Inner Voice? No. I really don't think that they should work, because that's what separates Camarilla and Sabbat, is their ability to disconnect themselves with human. And I do want to point that out, that some of the most dark, evil events that happen in the world, in the real world, have been done by humans. Being dark and evil and monstrous like many Camarilla elders does not make you any less human. It makes you less humane. And the humanity process in V5 is keeping you connected to being human, not necessarily humane. The ethics for Path of Power and the Inner Voice in V5 say reward success and excoriate failure, including one's own. So not only are you rewarding those and punishing those that are following you, you have to chastise yourself. You reward yourself. That's why so many people on Path of Power and the Inner Voice live in lavish luxury, in a fashion, is because they are punishing or rewarding themselves as well as those around them. The next one states, the world around the Cainite exists to be exploited to their benefit. The enlightened Cainite bends it to their will. So, if you are on this path, anything that you want, you need to use all of your vampiric gifts, all of your wile, all of your abilities that you've picked up along the road to make it what you want it to be. And the third one is force those who are beneath one's own position into servitude using all the means at one's command. So in other words, do anything that you can do to try to work your way into a position of leadership. In Chronicles, followers of the Path of Power and the Inner Voice are implacable foes. And whether they stand against individual enemies or structures that must be torn down, they are the most apt Sabbat at waging war and laying sieges. A pack of unifiers is a team of specialists, from frontline fighters to stalking elders and destabilizing rival domains with campaigns of terror and propaganda. Given its power accumulating focus, this power also lends itself to bullying domineering priests and followers, as Cainites exert their will through force of personality. Unifiers from extremely tight-knit packs that rely on the strength of the other Cainites for maximum success. Priests walk a fine line in these packs, as they need to remain the pack's authority. At the same time, they foster the thirst for might among the rest of the vampires in the pack. A well-disciplined pack is a single-minded entity, with each member anticipating the needs of their vicious fellows. A dysfunctional pack is a bunch of me-first opportunists looking to fuck over anyone else in the pursuit of their own gain, heedless of the cost in blood and strategic advantage. Packs like these need new priests because they've probably murdered and committed diablerie upon the previous one. I do like the fact that it does specify that. You've got your two different types of Path of Power in the Inner Voice packs. You have the one where everybody is actually working together for communal gain. The person who has the most experience, who has the ability to run things the best, is most likely going to be the guy in charge. And the ability to work together as a group, to listen to the person in charge, that's hard for these guys because everybody thinks that they should be the one in charge. But the idea is the end goal, not just being the figurehead, but actually being on top. The fight between Path of Power and the Inner Voice groups are going to end when all of their enemies are gone, because that's when they'll turn on themselves. Then there's the selfish packs, where everybody is just going to screw each other to get a bigger slice of the reward. And that's the sad thing that I can see a lot of packs erupting into. Now, disciplines for Path of Power and the Inner Voice is it's always one of my favorite parts of this. Many followers of this path focus on social and mental disciplines, the better to convince less willing individuals to perform as the unifiers desire, or to force them into compliance. They cultivate their physical disciplines as close second, the better to prosecute the conflicts in which they inevitably find themselves. Dominate, fortitude, potence, and presence are hallmark disciplines of the unifiers. So those are the disciplines that are going to pop up more. And it makes a lot of sense because with fortitude, you can really just impress by taking all that damage and continuing to go. Dominate is domineering. That really is a prime factor of Path of Power in the Inner Voice. Presence is one of those things where you can get people to do what you want. This really is a Ventru path when you stop and think about it. But I like that because no Ventru in the Sabbat really should be acting like your banker Ventru. They really should be crusaders and fighters and warlords more than anything else. Alright, so here we are inside of the Black Hand playing the Sabbat book, which is, again, not a canon book. This is a book that has amazing rules. It was worked on by some of the people who did the other Sabbat book. They work with World of Darkness. But this is considered a home brew, and a damn good one, I'll put that out. There are some writings on here I don't 100% agree with, but as far as the actual rules for how things work with this book, they really work if you want to bring the Sabbat into your game as playable characters. Now, Cainites on the Path of Power and the Inner Voice are obsessed with the trappings of dominance and increasing their own power. Bending their own will is a core tenet of the path, but so is honorably serving those more powerful until they falter or the roles are reversed. Those new to this path often rely on raw power to subjugate others, but the greatest unifiers know that loyalty given freely is where true power and respect lies. These distinctions are only a concern in regards to other Cainites, of course. Whether a mortal is controlled through trust or by blood servitude is immaterial to them. Unifiers believe that vampires are not only apex predators, but the rightful rulers of the world. Mortals who resist or hunt them are actively denying their role in the natural order. They recognize Cain as their king, not because he may have spawned them, but because he created and codified this model of vampiric rule over mortals in the city of Enoch, when the Andaluvians rebelled against Cain and went into hiding. They also destroyed the first city and the dream of a Cainite utopia. Role-playing. Unifiers dress to convey the power and dominance. Symbols of authority such as canes, clubs, crowns, tiaras, and riding crops are often part of their wardrobe. Unifiers are among few Sabbat who prefer mortal retainers, but often make use of brands, tattoos, leashes, or collars to mark them as possessions. The nicknames are the Unifiers or the Hollands. The Takbers are Cain is king, the first city, and the last. All serve the sword. The blood redeems, break the bonds. Before we get into the priesthood part, I do like the fact that they focus on the fact that Cain ran Enoch, and it seemed to be like a vampire human utopia. But I really do find the story of the Crone, which we covered at the beginning of this video, to be one of the best symbols of Path of Power in the Inner Voice, because Cain broke the blood bond. Cain broke the blood bond and learned how to use a stake as the perfect weapon against his own kind, now becoming one of the true dominators of vampiric existence. Not just the creator, but the true master of what that means. The priesthood. The unifiers are organized, but their hierarchy has suffered greatly since the start of the Gehenna War, as the mortal servants and ghoul families they depended upon have been scattered and devastated. Now unifiers are mostly limited to exerting control locally, with few able to claim the title greater than Archbishop. Only Seraphim can gather hosts as large as a cardinal of old. Unifier priests believe in ranks and insist that they be addressed as teacher, master, or mistress, and those who have authority over pacts are quickly to lay claim to the title of bishop as well. Unifiers make use of ghouls as props and assistants, and they prefer ostentatious implements such as silver chains, stacks of money, and thrones to echo Cain's rule. Pacts led by a unifier can resemble sedentary covens as they gather mortal pawns and influence, but they have no qualms about liquidating their assets and moving on when Gehenna War calls. Unifiers see mortals as useful tools, but only glory in victory won in service to the sword of Cain will see them reach the pinnacle of power. Priests of the Path of Power in the Inner Voice are never replaced without a struggle or monomancy, though these conflicts rarely result in final death, as unifiers will submit when confronted by a worthy leader. And I do like that, where the regular book states that people who are on the Path of Power in the Inner Voice are just going to hold on to their stuff. They're going to be selfish. They're going to be angry. They're just going to be monstrous when it comes to who's in charge. It's going to be like a pack of dogs fighting over a steak. But this book shows that if you can prove to a member of the Path of Power in the Inner Voice that you truly are worthy, they will submit to rule until they themselves can improve their leadership skills. That is something that needs to be taken in consideration, where, again, this book is what the Camarilla and the Anarch see. Where the book that I'm looking at right now is a homebrew that talks about what the Sabbat are on the inside. The touchstones for Path of Power in the Inner Voice says that the unifiers prefer to connect their convictions to the bloodbath, the fire dance, and the Valdery rite. Now, the Valdery is probably is on pretty much all of them, because that's how packs come together. But the bloodbath is a double-bladed sword as it comes to a ritual. In this ritual, what happens is the individual who is claiming power, usually somebody who gets to be a bishop or an archbishop or higher in status, what they will end up doing is they'll stand in a tub as the rest of the packs in the area will come up and they will pour blood over them. They will bathe them in blood. And it is twofold. As I said, it's a double-bladed sword. On one hand, it means that those packs are going to be loyal and they will serve that individual who they are bathing. On the other hand, it's also a threat, saying if they screw up, those packs will cover them in blood. And it's a ritual that I've always liked. Fire dance also is because you're proving your might and your will over the beast, that you are able to interact with fire as closely as that. Frenzy Unifiers never resist Fury Frenzy, as they see the beast as a powerful weapon and as a pure subconscious exertion of their will. When frenzying, they ride the wave and seek out their enemies' leaders. So when they frenzy, they just let it happen because that's them working in concert with the beast. Path compulsion is supremacy. Now, for those of you who don't know, in this book, the way that it works is if you are following a path of enlightenment and you get a clan compulsion, you have the right, as a member of the Sabbat, to choose whether or not you are going to suffer from your clan compulsion or your path compulsion, depending on which one you think is going to cause less damage to your character. The compulsion here, supremacy, says that the unifier is tired of waiting and serving others. They take what they deserve and demand obedience from their lessers. They suffer a -3 dice penalty on any actions for the rest of the scene and don't involve power or taking their rightful place. So you are going to demand to see people's managers. Basically, the whole point of that is you're done waiting. You're just going to get what you want as fast as possible, or you're going to be a 3 dice penalty to all actions that don't revolve around taking charge of that situation. The convictions say that the unifiers choose convictions that value domination, submission, and loyalty as virtues, with vampires naturally ruling over mortals. That makes a lot of sense. So the examples are loyalty is earned, might makes right, always respect power, the ends justify the means, never break your word to a Cainite. That's actually a really good one for the spot. And always reward success and punish failures. These convictions work really well, and they can be used in a Sabbat setting for the players to actually enjoy themselves. If I was going to take an Anarch or a Camarilla group and have them be spies in the Sabbat, I would have them probably come face to face with seeing an event where a pack priest was rewarding or punishing their pack members, because it's one of those things that really would, I think, set things off differently, because it's stuff that they would not expect to see them reward in a fashion. Now, the rewards are probably going to be just as vulgar as the punishments, though. Now, we have the merits, which is something that I actually really, really enjoy, the advantages for the paths. Basically, you have the chance to get a certain number of advantage points at character creation, and these will allow you to express things about your character. Let me just see, yes, and the way that it runs. So let's go ahead and just go over these. We're not going to do massive into the details, but I will go ahead and read them. Followers of the Path of Power and the Inner Voice are always willing to use mortal pawns in pursuit of their objectives. Though the Unifiers are some of the most inhumane vampires in the Sabbat, they pride themselves on being able to dominate any situation and will use any tool necessary to do so. They even see their own beasts as something that must be weaponized for the use against their enemies and rivals. So, Vassals. Once per session, the pack can call upon blackmailed mortals to provide them with cash, favors, or weapons as a criminal or police contact of the 2 background. So in other words, you actually, once per session, you can call on blackmailed humans to get you stuff that's hard to get. That's really nice. Vile threats. When unifiers are drawn into tests of personality, they do not rely on grace. Willpower, wounds inflicted by packmates in first rounds of social combat are aggravated if they have the proper path resonance. Also, the pack gains a mortal retainer. Interesting. So So in other words, like, you can cause aggravated willpower damage to people, but you also get a retainer. So that's a kind of an interesting thing. Leashed and unleashed. Unifiers let their beasts loose when needed. When a packmate frenzies during combat, they inflict +1 aggravated health wounds that round if they have the proper path residence. Also, the pack gains a mortal retainer. Whoa, okay. They're really big on making sure that you guys have access to retainers for this path, which I guess makes a lot of sense. And in the first round of combat, also, when your packmate's frenzying, they deal +1 aggravated damage. Number 3, or A3, because there's multiple choices on this, is Victims on Tap. All packmates can buy Dominate as if it were a clan discipline. Also, the pack gains a herd with the caloric resonance. Neat. And then there is also another 3 here, which is Conditioned into Submission. Mortals serving the pack have been abused into object submission. They are servile to a fault and won't hesitate to sacrifice themselves for their masters. These mortals act as an ally of 3 and will comply with suicidal commands without hesitation. If called upon to sacrifice themselves for the pack, treat these mortals as a broken servant. That's very interesting. So you have servants that will do anything, including kill themselves for you. They've been that broken. That's so insane. The path resonance for Path of Power in the Inner Voice is choleric. That is, yeah, that's what we got here. So that is Path of Power in the Inner Voice as far as this book is concerned. So I hope everybody enjoyed this Midnight Mass. I really do enjoy going through these. We have some amazing things coming in our World of Darkness, and oh my god, just lighting a fire under my butt to actually get it done is the hard part at this point. But I am Voivode Maquette. This is our World of Darkness, and thank you for joining me again on another Midnight Mass, and we will be back for another one when the moon is dark in the sky. Good evening.